Tonight, we're getting answers on the suspension of 15 police officers in the state of Massachusetts, 3 being from Western Mass. Thanks, everyone, for joining us on this Wednesday, and welcome to Western Mass News at 6. I'm Chris Pisano.
And I'm Mary Wilson. This all being done by the Massachusetts Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, or POST. Western Mass News reporter Paris Dunford joins us live in studio with what she's learned. Paris.
Chris, Mary, the Post Commission just suspended the licenses of 15 officers, all who have been either arrested, charged, or indicted for a felony. One name on that list is Leon Davis, a former Springfield police officer. 15 Bay State police officers had their certification suspended this week. It was all done by the Massachusetts Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, or POST. This commission is fairly new, developed after the passing of the 2020 Massachusetts Police Reform Bill.
How to hold officers accountable while at the same time supporting them in every way possible to make sure that their day-to-day operations to protect and serve is done in the most highest authority, with the most highest authority, but in a way that's deemed appropriate to protect and serve.
On their list of duties is a requirement to immediately suspend any officer that has been either arrested, charged, or indicted for a felony. Their first round of suspensions included 15 officers, 3 of which were officers in Western Mass. The most well-known might be Leon Davis, a former Springfield police officer accused of using excessive force with his taser on a pregnant woman. You can see the events that played out here in this body camera footage from that day in September of 2020. He is currently listed as an employee but not working for the department. Springfield spokesperson Ryan Walsh tells us, quote, Officer Davis hasn't worked as a Springfield police officer for nearly 2 years. Officer Devin Bones from the Holyoke Police Department also on that list because of an ongoing criminal case out of Springfield. We've learned Bones was placed on suspension from the force. And former West Springfield Police Captain Brian Pomeroy also listed. He is charged with 2 counts of indecent assault and battery on 2 female co-workers during an after-party following the Holyoke St. Patrick's Day Parade in 2022. Western Mass News received a statement from the West Springfield Police Department that reads, quote, Brian Pomeroy has not been employed by the town of West Springfield since July 13, 2022. The West Springfield Police Department has been transparent and compliant with all of the Post Commission's requirements. We cannot comment on Mr. Pomeroy's pending legal matters, as he is no longer an employee of the West Springfield Police Department. But we wanted to know if Pomeroy was already removed from the force, what is the significance of Post revoking his certification? We took that question to Associate Professor of Criminal Justice Craig Dunton.
Basically, they mean that within that state, they would no longer be eligible to be hired for law enforcement, no matter what the jurisdiction would be.
He says Post action of suspending these officer certifications prevents them from being a police officer in any other part of the state. However, it does not prevent these former officers from applying to other police departments in other states. State Representative Carlos Gonzalez is the chairman of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee. He says the officers who are suspended are placed in a database, and he hopes that will be considered when any of these officers apply for a job out of state.
The overall goal is to make sure that officers are held to the same standards across the country, and we look forward to seeing that officers that are let go from one state for a violation of their oath will not be allowed to serve in another state.
Now, a law enforcement officer whose certification is suspended can request a hearing before a commissioner within 15 days. A suspension order is in effect until a final decision or revocation is made by the commission. If an officer is decertified, they can no longer work for any law enforcement agency in the state of Massachusetts. Reporting live in studio, Paris Dunford for Western Mass News.